During these troubled times, it's great to see so many helpers. That's Mr. Rogers. This is my first time on Zoom doing a presentation, so your feedback afterwards would be much appreciated. I've done lots of presentations live to people, but this is the first time going with Zoom. And my goal is to help you better understand either employees or people you work with, or even family members that might be living with anxiety or depression. Maybe some of the clients you serve, and if you're working with students as well, maybe with students. I was a high school vice principal and a teacher, and I'm diagnosed with depression and anxiety and panic attacks. And 10 years ago, I was off work for 3 months. And so I've been sharing my journey to help people understand and remove a lot of the stigma that's associated with mental illness, particularly the word mental. I'm also the past chairperson from Movember, Waterloo Region. I did that a few years, and then I stepped away a couple of years ago. Many people know Movember does prostate cancer and testicular cancer for younger men as well. Excuse me. But Movember also added mental health. And the more I talked to people as the Movember chairperson, he kept asking, do you know what's mental health as well? And people didn't know. So last November, I set a goal. Actually, I did it on October 10th, which was World Mental Health Day. I set the goal to do 30 talks in 30 days to normalize the conversation around mental health. And World Mental Health Day on October 10th set the goal for this upcoming year, which we're still in, as the focus on understanding suicide and suicide ideation. And I have a person who's lived with suicidal thoughts going back to my teenage years. I can talk about that one at another time. So I started doing the 30 talks with the goal of getting the information out there about depression and anxiety. And I launched speaking to a grade 7-8 school in Waterloo. And after I was done, the principal sent my information out to other schools. And I started hearing from lots of principals from the elementary schools. I've done a lot of talks to high schools, so that's where my background was. And more they were seeing kids with not behavior problems, but anxiety and depression. And they didn't really have a lot of training on it. So I got invited to come to elementary schools. And when I started talking to grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8s, I called my presentation Butterflies in My Tummy. Because we all know that feeling of excitement before a first presentation or something that's coming up that's important to you. But it doesn't have to be bad things. It could be before a first date or things like that. So, but it's an excitement response. And so it's the fight or flight response which causes that excitement. And the more I understood how it worked and the more I was able to help with kids to understand it, when we understand it, as with any illness and stuff, then we know how to get help and we don't think we're alone, and then we drop a lot of the stigma. The principals kept asking me if I could work with younger kids, and then I started working with elementary kids in the kindergarten 1, 2, and 3. Now, when I talk to high school kids, I can talk to them a bit about suicide ideation. I can talk in pretty depth about what anxiety and depression is. When I get to grade 4, 5, 6s, you have to take that down a little bit. And then with the elementary kids, I said, okay, I can't really go into my journey very much. And so I started doing some stuff with the mindfulness, which I've got lots of experience in. So I'm going to share my screen now with you. Okay, we're going to do it from the beginning. And so my presentation is, after doing the 30 talks in 30 days in November, I actually ended up doing 62 talks, and it took me into the middle of December. And I got to speak to over 5,800 kids and businesses and community groups. I relaunched for January of 2020, I can see clearly now, from mental illness to brain health. So I'm a mentally ill person, and I really don't like that term. I have a brain, and when we talk about the brain, I think it's easier for us to understand it. It drops the stigma. So here's one of the activities I did with the elementary kids. So as it's expanding, you should be breathing in through your nose and then out through your mouth. So with me, in through your nose, and out your mouth. Just do another one here in your nose and out your mouth. I know we could do a whole bunch of those, but I need to move on.
It's hard to do.
It's an amazing practice, and so much of the breathing and the mindfulness stuff is really the key to turning off our survival fight or flight brain. To hit the pause button, which is what a lot of us need to do, from Warren Buffett here, you'll continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that's said to you. And true power is actually sitting back and observing things with logic. And true power is actually restraint. So if words control you, then that means anyone can control you. So this is the stuff I was sharing with the elementary kids, not in this detail, but with their teachers as well. And if you breathe, you allow things to pass. And so that's his quote. But when you hit the pause button, when someone does something to you or says something to you that you don't like, that's mean or is hurtful, pause before reacting. Our first thoughts is not who we are as human beings. Our first thoughts and reactions are usually that fight or flight part of us that says, someone's offended me and I'm mad and I want to hit or run away or do something. But that's not who we have to be. That's called the old brain response. And the new brain response is when you pause and give yourself a chance for your second thought to develop, the calmer, the more understanding one. That's who you really are, and pause and breathe. And that's the new brain, or the neocortex. Okay, just how to stop the share there. And let's stop the slideshow. Two things. Okay. And so that strategy of breathing, it's connected to just about every aspect of mindfulness we do to turn off the brain. And I'll go into a little detail later. I continue to do presentations to businesses and community groups as well. And by the time I was done, I'd said I'd done 62 talks. But everything I had planned for 2020 is now on hold, like all of you are on hold in so many areas. I don't want to stop. The reason I started, if you go back and read my blog on my webpage, was the concept of the suicide ideation. And I've taught students that died by suicide. I knew teachers that died by suicide. I've known friends that died by suicide. And I live with these thoughts. And one more suicide is one more too many. And right now, when we're stuck at home and not able to communicate, I think it's more and more important that we understand that more people are going to go through similar things to what I've lived through. And so that's my goal right now, and I appreciate the chance to speak to you on it. I just want to read one more thing. Let's see if this works right. So I just finished reading a great book called Depression is a Liar, and it's by Danny Baker, who lived with depression. And this is a key quote I got from the book. It said, adolescents need to be educated about depression. In my humble opinion, they need to be educated about depression in school. They also need to be educated about depression at home, in the same way they're educated about safe sex and drink driving. Why? Because if they find themselves experiencing the symptoms, they can then realize that they're suffering from an illness and can go and get treatment. But if they don't know what depression is, then they won't seek help, and as a result, they'll prolong their suffering. They might self-medicate with drugs and alcohol and develop an addiction. They might self-harm by ripping out their hair, cutting themselves with razors, or lighting parts of their body on fire. And worst of all, they might kill themselves. Some parents think depression is something that's too dark for the teenagers to be exposed to. And then he goes on to say, if you're one of those, there's a bunch of stats. And yeah, so that's kind of where I am right now and what I'm doing. Okay, so the presentation I go by is butterflies in my tummy, and we all experience that. And Bell Let's Talk has been one of the big ones. 10 years ago was when I was off work for 6 weeks, and that's when Bell Let's Talk came out, and it helped normalize the conversation that there's someone else who has a brain like me, in Clara Hughes. And so my anxiety first snuck up on me by waking up at 4:30 every morning. And no matter what I did, and this lasted weeks going into, it started when school started in the fall as a teacher, and it kept going, and I couldn't get to sleep, and eventually I couldn't remember things. And I just thought, at that point I was 40 years old, 40 something years old. And I just thought that was part of getting older. I really did. I didn't think that had anything to do with anxiety and or depression. And just imagine your teacher not being able to remember your students' names though. It went on for months, and my body and brain burned out eventually. So anxiety is when you can't turn off your brain. You think you can't get to sleep, or you can't stay asleep. And if you can't sleep, eventually your brain stops working and it burns out. And that burnout is what we call depression. And so I thought I was alone until Clara Hughes started speaking about it. And she said she had a brain like mine, and I wasn't alone. And in hindsight, 10 years ago, we didn't talk about it. And it made such a big difference in my life. And I believe that's one of the first steps to getting better, is knowing that you're not alone and that there are other people who are willing to stand up. I did get a fair bit of positive feedback when I started speaking to my staff when I came back to work. I asked the principal, I said, can I take 10 or 15 minutes to share what it's like as a guy who coaches the football team and runs the dances and all these things, who's basically had the stuffing knocked out of him. And he let me speak. And when I was done speaking, a bunch of ladies come up to thank me, and they thanked me for speaking as a man. And I thought it was interesting, like, okay, why are they thanking me as a man? It didn't make any sense. And with, my science background and my desire for knowledge, I did some research, and women are diagnosed 4 to 1 with depression and anxiety compared to men. But I continue to research, and men are alcoholics 10 to 1 compared to women. And so when we look at it, women are, and I generalize, as long as we don't pigeonhole people, when I generalize that there's some men that think differently and some women think differently. But when we understand that when women get help, so they get diagnosed and they get help, but if men don't go for the help, one of my big things with Movember was about men is we need to talk about it. And so these butterflies in my tummy, my brain's different than many people. It's 1 in 5 of us will have a mental illness sometime in our life. And so, if we look in our room here, 1, 2, 3, 4, me, 1, 2, 3, 4, someone, that's a lot of people. And when I looked at it, my brain's actually a blessing, but and a curse as well, because my brain did help me get through university. But my whole life, I've always felt like I'm not good enough. This is a picture of me at university, back when I could grow hair. And I share this picture in particular because I have the alumni gold medal around my neck. And that's for the top person. The top person in math gets that award. The top person in computer science will get it. The top in science. And I got it as the top person in kinesiology, human kinetics. And my brain's very, very smart. But I was also living with suicidal thoughts at the same time I was at university. And that's going back to the 80s, and we didn't talk about it. And we often think people with anxiety, depression are the poor people or the homeless people on the street, and it's not. There's something called high functioning anxiety and depression. It's basically a doctor's term that says, yeah, you got it, and you're doing your job and you're getting through it, which I did for years until I couldn't end up being off work. So my brain helped me become a high school teacher, but it always made me feel like Eeyore. I lived under this black cloud of life. And it helped me become a high school vice principal, but it also woke me up at 4:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And this is a couple of years ago when I tried to grow my hair again, and that beard right now is a lot more shades gray than that. I'll just do a few more slides here. So my brain, it helped me become the quarterback of the football team in high school, but I never ever felt I deserved to be loved. And without going into a lot of detail, I grew up in an alcoholic home, and my dad was a police officer and had a pretty tough life. And I didn't realize the effect that had on me. The good news is I came to terms with my dad before he passed away, which was around 10 years ago as well. But I just always felt like I didn't deserve your love. I just felt like I wasn't ever good enough. And this is me with the beard and the hair helping another guy do some stretching at Olympia Sports Camp where I coach it. I still coach up there. And so my brain helped me become a good father, but at times it made me not want to live. And I still live with that today. But now when the suicidal thoughts come in, they don't get in there and overtake my mind and knock me down. They kind of bounce once and I tell them, get out. I breathe them on through. And this picture, like this guy here, my youngest guy on the left is 25, and then 28, my daughter's 30, and she has 2 kids. But I was living with suicidal thoughts, and it didn't make sense. I wasn't an unhappy person. I'm quite blessed in my life, but I just didn't want to live, and I just couldn't sleep. And when I look back at it, I've had this since I was in my teenage years. We just didn't talk about it. Yeah. So I went to the doctor. I said, I need a pill. Something help me stay asleep. I can't get my brain turned off. And I can't remember things. And he immediately said, it sounds like anxiety and depression. I'm telling you, those aren't words I wanted to hear. That sounds like a weakness type of thing. And I also thought depression was sadness. And I said, I'm not sad, I just need to stay asleep. And that's the first time I learned that you don't have to be sad. The chemicals in your brain can actually get stuck or depressed. And he suggested I see a therapist to get unstuck. And I will tell you, and as a man, that talking to someone else about my problems, that was pretty low on my list. But I had to do something. I had to get some sleep. And so psychologists or therapists or counselors, they help us get unstuck by helping us detangle what's going on in our brains. And, or better yet, and that's my goal, is to get us to understand how not to get stuck in the first place. So I went to see a counselor. His name was Dave, Dr. Dave. And I went in and he said, okay, well, what's waking you up in the middle of the night? And, what is it that's going on? I said, well, I got a mortgage and 2 car payments and 3 kids all doing competitive sports and music. And I'm coaching full time and I'm teaching full time. And I coach after school and I coach after dinner. And he said, slow down. He said, take a deep breath. There's that breath again. There's a big theme here with the breath. He said, let's take it one thing at a time. He said, you have a house. Did you want a house? Yeah, I wanted a house. Actually, I have a pretty nice house. I bought it way back in the 80s before the market went crazy. I have a nicer house than I ever expected to have. He said, you have 2 cars. Did you want 2 cars? Yeah, I needed one car for me and one for Valerie. A little aside there, Valerie and I aren't together anymore. We were married 28 years. We were high school sweethearts. And my depression cost me the marriage because Valerie needed to get out from underneath the depressed umbrella that I lived under. We're still very good friends. We share 3 wonderful kids, 2 grandkids, and but depression sucks sometimes. So anyway, so he said, yeah, you have a house, you have 2 cars, do you have 3 kids? Did you want 3 kids? Yeah. Did you want a job as a teacher? And all the things I was worrying about were actually my blessings. Like from Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs, I have food, water, shelter, and people that care about us. Like that's a lot. Yet my brain didn't want to live. And so he helped me look at all those things I was worrying about were actually just blessings. And so I was seeing the cup as half empty, and our brain gets stuck in that cycle of worry, versus seeing the cup as half full. And that's what we focus on grows. So if we focus on our problems and see them as problems all the time, we can get stuck in this anxiety that can turn into depression. But if we can turn it around, and we're in that mode right now where we need to help a lot of people turn it around. So I slept. After talking to the counselor, I slept. And he also said, there's my that was easy button. He also said, keep a pen and paper beside your bed. Because if you wake up in the middle of the night with your brain racing, if you write it down, it will release it and your brain can go back to sleep. So it would be thinking about some math lesson I taught for years, but I just couldn't turn it off, or something that, anything I was worrying about wasn't life or death. And so I slept like a baby.
Aw. How cute are you?
Yeah, I could grow hair.
You sure could.
And then just this next one is that, this worry thing, my mom was so proud of being the worrier in our family. It was kind of her role. And that worrying never, ever helps us get things better. Thinking and planning does, but the worrying doesn't. And so I'm just going to stop the share here. Oh, sorry, I'm going to do this one more. So I believe that empathy is a key factor. And after I shared to teachers asked me to talk to health classes in high school or anthropology classes. It's on the grade 11 phys ed curriculum for both boys and girls, and the grade 11 psychology anthropology class. And this empathy thing is, empathy is the ability to feel other people's feelings. And I've always had that. And as a guy, I always hid that. I didn't want people to know I had these sensitive feelings. But empathy really helps us understand each other's, and we can feel their pain. But it takes a lot of feelings. And so now I don't believe I need to hide my sensitivity anymore. I just call it empathy, and I am a superhero. That's my cape. I am an empathy man. And I think it's really important that we, as guys, all people as well, but as guys, it's okay to have these feelings. They weren't feelings you wanted to have as a guy playing football and share. I think they're really important for everyone to understand that empathy is a pretty important skill for most employers, and what we're going through right now, I think it's pretty darn employment. I'll let you read that one.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will stop the share there because we have to use humor. When we talk about mental health and mentally ill, there's so much on it that's scary for people. Thank you. So I can talk for days. We've been on here a long time. I'm going to suggest I don't talk anymore I've got slides that go on for another hour if we wanted, but I'm going to suggest at this point, we have a couple more meetings coming up in May and June that I would gladly follow up on with, because basically I've given you the introduction, but I haven't given you the strategies. And that's kind of stupid to not give it the strategies. But you go look at mindfulness breathing strategies, or if you want to stay on, if people want to stay on individually and listen or ask questions, I would gladly do this, because I know those conversations I shared with the ladies come up and talked to me after the staff meeting. No men came and talked to me after the staff meeting. Men came into my office one by one over the next few weeks to talk to me. And it's still an awkward conversation. So I'm going to pass it back to you and see kind of where we go from here, because it's just after 3 o'clock.
Isn't he great? He's so respectful of our schedules. It's so hard to stick to a schedule when it comes to these times, right? And we need time to sort of speak our truths. And after meeting Kevin, who Sarah Ruth met at the gym, by the way, so thank you for that chance meeting and how important those are these days.
Small world.
Very small world. And
small.
we're going to just keep building on it. I'm actually exhilarated to have this opportunity to connect with people like this and have them focus on stuff. And I think we're listening differently now, because we know how important all of our jobs are, not just to our families, but the work that we're doing as volunteer managers is connecting people to really important stuff and to important people. Kevin is certainly there for us. If you want to have him talk to you further, I'll keep the line open as long as you want. I don't want to be part of it, so you can connect privately too. But I know after I spoke with you the one day, I think I did have an anxiety attack on Thursday, right, Sarah Ruth? I called into Jane and I went, you know what? I have butterflies in my tummy. And I didn't really even know this presentation yet, but, and I didn't call them butterflies. It was just, there was moisture coming out of the eyeball area and I couldn't stop. So, and it was just, it came upon me and I realized I could not function on all the levels that were coming at me in the new era. So I feel like I was empowered by Kevin's short meeting, and I hope that you all will be as well, to recognize your volunteers that need you, and you need yourself, and that we're here for each other. I think it's a really impressive time to see men coming out and showing their true colors, and it's okay. Ken, what'd you think? You thought it was great, didn't you? I always pick on a Ken at the volunteer manager meetings.
I thought it was excellent. Yes. Thank you for your openness and honesty. And yes, we men need more of that. Thank you for leading the way.
Yeah. I just want to leave you guys with one thing as a group. It's called caregiver fatigue, and it's just getting a name. And there's a great article on secondary trauma stress, understanding the effects. And it says symptoms are not a sign of weakness, but an indicator they might need support because they work in a challenging profession. And when you're in a caring profession like all of you do, and a lot of this is volunteer above and beyond, when you're a caregiver, when you get on the airplane, who do they say to put the oxygen mask on first?
Yeah.
Right? That's a really powerful one. And
I've heard of compassion fatigue too, Kevin, which
yes.
was something I wrote down when you were talking
Yes.
about empathy.
Yeah.
And I never really had a name for it, but I thought maybe that's sometimes what we're feeling when we're feeling a little overwhelmed. Right, Kirsten? She's sitting there listening.
Yeah. And so the key is then we want to put it on the kid, but we're supposed to put it on ourselves first, because if I go to put it on the kid and I pass out, I didn't help the kid. And so that goes with us as caregivers or the compassion helpers, is you got to put it on yourself first. And one of the key phrases I came up with, learning how to say no politely to something. Because if you want something done, you ask a busy person. And busy people don't know. I see a bunch of you nodding right now. And busy people often don't know how to say no. So you have to be selective about what you take on. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you must or you should. And so here's my phrase, and you can quote me on it. I can paste it here later. I think what you're doing is a great idea, and I really support you doing it, but my plate is pretty full right now. And I just, when I look back at all the teams I was coaching, I didn't know how to say no to things. And that wasn't good for me in the long run. It cost me in my health, and it cost me spending quality time with my family as well. And so learning, how to say no, or maybe no right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin.